The call of the unknown. The wagon wheels turn slowly in the red dust of dawn. It's 1852, and David Livingstone sits beside his driver as their ox-drawn cart creaks away from everything known, everything mapped, everything certain. Behind them, the mission station at Kuruman grows smaller with each revolution of those wooden wheels. Ahead lies the heart of Africa, a continent that exists on European maps as little more than a vast empty space marked simply unexplored. You know this feeling, don't you? That moment when you step beyond the boundaries of what's been done before. When you leave behind the comfortable certainty of employment, of predictable days, of someone else's vision, and venture into territory that exists only in your imagination. The weight you carry feels heavier in these moments, doesn't it? But there's something else there too. Something that pulls you forward despite the uncertainty. Livingstone feels it now as the African sun climbs higher, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. The air carries scents he cannot yet name, wild grasses, distant water, the promise of rain that may not come for months. His supplies shift and settle with each bump of the track, medical instruments wrapped carefully in canvas, books that seem almost absurd in their civilized certainty, and enough provisions to sustain him for, well, no one really knows how long. This is what courage looks like, you see. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of something stronger. Purpose, perhaps, or simply the recognition that some questions can only be answered by moving forward into the unknown. The Kalahari Desert stretches before them, but Livingstone's mind reaches beyond even that vast expanse. He carries with him stories told by African traders, tales of great rivers flowing through the interior, of peoples and kingdoms that exist beyond the imagination of his European contemporaries. These stories have taken root in him, like seeds in fertile ground, growing into something he cannot ignore. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the universe is change, and our life is what our thoughts make it. Sitting here in that creaking wagon, Livingstone embodies this truth. Where others see emptiness on the map, he sees possibility. Where others see danger, he sees discovery. Where others see the end of the known world, he sees the beginning of understanding. The oxen move with patient determination, their hooves raising small clouds of dust that catch the morning light. There's wisdom in their steady pace, isn't there? No rushing toward the horizon, no frantic urgency. Just consistent forward motion, step after step, mile after mile. It's a lesson worth remembering as you build what you're building. That progress often looks less like a sprint and more like this. Steady, deliberate, sometimes painfully slow movement towards something you can see clearly in your mind, but cannot yet touch with your hands. Livingstone's wife Mary and their children have remained behind in England. The separation weighs on him. You can see it in the set of his shoulders, the way his gaze occasionally turns inward. This is the price of exploration, isn't it? The people we love must often watch from a distance as we pursue the visions that drive us. They carry their own weight while we carry ours, connected by invisible threads across vast distances. But listen to the sounds around him now. The creak of leather and wood, the soft lowing of the oxen, the whisper of wind through grass. There's a rhythm here, a natural cadence that speaks to something deeper than ambition or even duty. It's the sound of alignment, when what you're doing matches who you are meant to be. The track they follow is barely visible, worn by the feet of countless African travelers over generations. Livingstone has the wisdom to follow these ancient paths, to recognize that exploration doesn't always mean forging entirely new routes. Sometimes the greatest discoveries come from following the knowledge of those who have walked this way before, but with eyes trained to see what others might have missed. As the hours pass, the landscape begins to change subtly. The grass grows taller in places, shorter in others. The spacing between acacia trees shifts in patterns that speak of underground water, seasonal rains, the complex relationships between soil and climate that determine where life flourishes and where it merely survives. Livingstone makes notes of these observations, building a mental map that will serve him in the months to come. There's something profound about this moment of departure, isn't there? This threshold between the known and unknown. You've crossed similar thresholds, perhaps not in ox-drawn wagons across African landscapes, but in conference rooms where you've pitched impossible ideas, in moments when you've committed resources you couldn't afford to lose. in conversations where you've shared visions that existed nowhere but in your imagination. The courage required is the same. The uncertainty is equally vast. The weight you carry feels just as heavy. But notice what sustains Livingstone as the miles accumulate behind him. It's not just determination, though he has that in abundance. It's not merely curiosity, though that drives him forward. It's something the Stoics understood well, the recognition that some paths choose us as much as we choose them, that the discomfort of not knowing can be less painful than the discomfort of not trying. The sun reaches its zenith, and they stop to rest the oxen in whatever shade they can find. Livingstone shares water with his companions, local men who have agreed to guide him through territories they know better than any European map could capture. There's trust here, built slowly through shared purpose and mutual respect. Without them, his mission would be impossible. With them, it transforms from solitary ambition into collaborative discovery. This, too, mirrors what you know about building something meaningful. The vision may be yours, but the realization requires others who see what you see, who are willing to share the uncertainty and the possibility in equal measure. The weight you carry becomes lighter when it's distributed among people who understand both the destination and the importance of the journey. As afternoon shadows begin to lengthen, Livingstone pulls out his compass and takes readings, noting their progress in his journal. But the real navigation is happening at a deeper level. He's learning to read the land itself, the way certain birds indicate water, how the behavior of insects changes with elevation, the subtle signs that speak of human habitation beyond the horizon. The wagon rolls on, wheels turning steadily in the dust. Each revolution carries them further from certainty and closer to questions that have waited centuries for answers. What rivers flow through the heart of this continent? What peoples have built their lives along those distant shores? What knowledge exists in places European scholars have never imagined? These questions pull him forward like magnetic north, creating their own form of navigation. Purpose, you see, has its own compass. It points not toward what is, but toward what might be. Not toward comfort, but toward contribution. Not toward the easy path, but toward the necessary one. As the day draws toward evening, they'll make camp under stars that have watched over this land for millennia. Tomorrow will bring more dust, more uncertainty, more miles between them and everything familiar. But tonight, in the firelight, Livingstone will update his maps and plan the next day's route, adding small marks to vast empty spaces, beginning the patient work of transforming unknown into known. The call of the unknown grows stronger with each mile traveled. It's a call you recognize, isn't it? The same voice that whispers in those quiet moments when the weight you carry feels almost too much, when the distance between where you are and where you're going seems impossibly vast. It's the voice that reminds you why you began this journey in the first place. And tomorrow the real adventure begins. Whispers of the Zambezi. The morning light reveals what darkness had hidden. A landscape that stretches beyond the horizon, vast and uncompromising. Livingstone stands at the edge of camp, watching his small party prepare for the day ahead. 27 men in total, most of them Makololo warriors who have chosen to accompany him on this impossible journey. Their quiet efficiency speaks of men who understand the weight of what lies ahead. You know this feeling, don't you? That moment when you survey the magnitude of what you're building, when the full scope of the challenge reveals itself in the clear light of morning. The comfortable certainties of yesterday's camp must be left behind. Today requires movement into territory no map can guide you through. The oxen are restless, sensing the change in the air. Livingstone's journals record the methodical process of breaking camp, the careful packing of instruments, medicines, and trade goods. Every item has been weighed against necessity. There's no room for the superfluous when every pound must be carried across a continent. His guide, Sekwebu, points toward a line of trees in the distance. The river is there, he says simply. But between here and there lies country that will test every assumption, every carefully laid plan. The grass grows taller than a man in places, concealing ravines that could swallow a wagon whole. Tsetse flies hover in clouds, their bite capable of killing the strongest ox within days. This is the reality of pioneering, not the romantic vision of discovery, but the grinding daily work of pushing forward when everything resists your progress. The weight you carry becomes heavier with each mile, not lighter. The vision that seemed so clear in the mission station now wavers like heat shimmer on the horizon. But watch how Livingstone moves through this uncertainty. He doesn't rush. He doesn't panic when the path disappears into tall grass or when the oxen refuse to cross a stream. Instead, he pauses. He listens. He learns from those who know this land better than he ever will. The African, he writes in his journal that evening, possesses a knowledge of country that puts our European methods to shame. They read the landscape like a book written in a language I am only beginning to understand. There's profound wisdom in this admission. The successful pioneer, the builder of lasting things, learns to recognize what they don't know. They surround themselves with guides who can see what remains invisible to outsider eyes. They understand that strength lies not in stubborn independence, but in the humility to accept guidance from unexpected sources. The days settle into rhythm, the steady rhythm of miles covered, camps made, obstacles overcome. Each morning brings the same methodical preparation. Each evening, the same careful attention to the needs of men and animals pushed to their limits. There's something deeply settling about this routine, isn't there? The way consistent action, repeated day after day, gradually transforms the impossible into the inevitable. Your own journey has this quality, this need for daily disciplines that seem insignificant in isolation, but compound into extraordinary results over time. The early morning decisions, the difficult conversations, the steady attention to details others might overlook. This is how continents are crossed. This is how lasting things are built. The sounds of the African night become familiar companions. The distant roar of lions, the haunting call of hyenas, the rustle of unseen creatures moving through the grass. Initially threatening, these sounds gradually transform into something else, a kind of natural symphony that speaks of a world far larger and older than human ambition. Livingstone learns to find comfort in this vastness. I am, he writes, but a small note in a grand composition. Yet even the smallest note played at the right moment contributes to the beauty of the whole. This perspective, this ability to hold simultaneously the importance of your mission and the humility of your place within something greater, this is what sustains pioneers through the inevitable moments of doubt. The weight you carry matters precisely because it's part of something larger than yourself. 3 weeks into the journey, they reach the Zambezi River. The sound reaches them first, a distant murmur that grows stronger with each mile. Then the trees change, growing taller, more lush. The air itself feels different, charged with moisture and possibility. And finally, through a gap in the vegetation, they see it. Water. Vast, brown, powerful water flowing toward an unknown destination. Livingstone stands on the bank, watching the current carry fallen branches toward whatever lies downstream. His Makololo companions point excitedly toward the far shore. Barotse land, they say, the country of our people, but Livingstone's eyes follow the water in the other direction, toward the coast, toward the route that might finally connect the heart of Africa to the wider world. This river, he realizes, might be the answer to questions that have driven him across half a continent. You recognize this moment, don't you? When weeks or months of steady progress suddenly reveal an opportunity you hadn't fully anticipated. When the daily grind of building something worthwhile suddenly opens onto possibilities that exceed even your most ambitious projections. The temptation is to rush, to immediately pursue every promising direction. But watch what Livingstone does instead. He makes camp, he observes. He talks with his guides about what they know of the river's course. He takes careful measurements and records detailed observations in his journal. Haste, he notes, is the enemy of lasting achievement. The river will still flow tomorrow. The opportunity will still exist. But the knowledge needed to pursue it wisely, that must be gathered with patience and care. That evening, as the campfire crackles and the men share stories of their homeland across the water, Livingstone writes by lamplight. His words capture not just geographical observations, but something deeper. The profound satisfaction that comes from steady progress toward a worthy goal. We have traveled far from the certainties of the mission station, he writes. Each mile has stripped away some comfortable assumption about what this journey would require, yet I find myself more convinced than ever that we are moving in the right direction. The river before us speaks of connections yet to be made, of pathways yet to be opened, of benefits yet to flow to people who have waited too long in isolation. The weight he carries has not diminished. If anything, the proximity to real progress has made him more aware of how much depends on the choices he makes in the days ahead. But weight carried in service of clear purpose, weight shared with trusted companions, weight that moves steadily toward meaningful destination, this is not burden, but ballast. As you lie there tonight, feeling the familiar pressure of tomorrow's responsibilities, remember this riverside moment. The Zambezi flowing steadily toward its destination, carrying everything that enters its current toward something larger than itself. Your own efforts, the daily decisions, the careful building, the patient progress through uncertain territory, these too are part of a current larger than any single ambition. The value you create, the problems you solve, the people whose lives improve because of what you're building, this extends far beyond your immediate vision. The river knows its destination even when individual drops of water cannot see beyond the next bend. Trust the current you've chosen to join. Trust the steady progress that seems so slow in daily experience but covers vast distances when measured across months and years. Tomorrow, Livingstone will begin the delicate work of crossing this mighty river, of moving from observation to action, from planning to execution. Tonight, he rests in the satisfaction of steady progress toward a destination that grows clearer with each mile traveled, and so can you. River crossings and encounters. The morning sun finds Livingstone's party already stirring, the rhythm of preparation now as natural as breathing. 3 weeks of daily river crossings have taught them the delicate choreography of moving men, supplies, and precious instruments across waters that change character with each bend. Today's crossing presents a particular challenge. The Chobe tributary runs deeper than yesterday's ford, its current more insistent. The local guides wade in first, probing the bottom with long sticks, reading the water's secrets with practiced eyes. They move with the patient precision you've learned to value in your own work. That careful assessment before commitment, that willingness to test assumptions before staking everything on a single approach. Here, calls Sekwebu, pointing to a stretch where the water runs clearer over a gravel bed. The oxen sense the day's labor ahead, shifting restlessly in their traces as the men begin rolling up their trousers. There's something profoundly honest about this moment, about standing at the edge of moving water, knowing the only way forward is through. No amount of planning can eliminate the shock of cold water around your ankles, the uncertain footing on stones made slippery by current and time. Progress requires this willingness to get wet, to feel the push of forces beyond your control while maintaining steady movement toward the far bank. The first ox enters reluctantly, then with growing confidence as it finds solid footing. The wagon groans and creaks, its wheels finding purchase on the riverbed's uneven surface. Water swirls around the spokes, creating small whirlpools that catch the morning light like scattered coins. Livingstone wades alongside, one hand steadying his precious chronometer case, the other ready to assist if the crossing turns treacherous. The water rises to his knees, then recedes as the riverbed shifts beneath them. Each step requires attention, not the scattered, anxious attention that exhausts you in sleepless hours, but the focused presence that emerges when the task at hand demands everything you have. The weight you carry feels different in moving water, somehow lighter, as if the current takes some burden upon itself, sharing the load for these precious minutes of crossing. The oxen lean into their work, understanding that hesitation serves no one. Forward movement, steady and deliberate, becomes the only sensible response to uncertainty. Halfway across, young Moharisi slips on a moss-covered stone. Without thought, 2 companions steady him, their hands quick and sure. No drama, no heroic gestures, just the natural response of people who understand they're bound together in this crossing. The same instinct that makes you reach out when a team member struggles, knowing that everyone's success depends on everyone's arrival at the far shore. The reeds on the opposite bank grow larger as they approach, their feathery tops catching the breeze like nature's own semaphore. A fish eagle calls from somewhere upstream, its cry echoing off the water with wild authority. These sounds of Africa have become the soundtrack to progress. Not the urgent pinging of messages or the hum of artificial light, but the deeper rhythms that have measured human endeavor since the first crossing of the first river. As the wagon wheels finally bite into the muddy bank, there's a moment of collective satisfaction, not celebration. The day holds many more such crossings, but acknowledgement. Recognition that another obstacle has yielded to patient, coordinated effort, that what seemed daunting from the far bank proves manageable when approached with proper preparation and mutual support. They pause to wring out wet clothing and check supplies for water damage. The chronometers have stayed dry. The medical kit remains secure. Small victories that accumulate into larger ones. The same way your careful attention to details, day after day, builds toward outcomes that seemed impossible when you first conceived them. By afternoon, they encounter their first village in several days. Smoke rises from cooking fires, and children's voices carry across the cultivated fields. Livingstone calls a halt while still at a respectful distance, understanding that arrival requires invitation, not assumption. This is where his years of preparation reveal their true value, not in the maps or instruments, but in his approach to human encounter. He waits, observes, allows curiosity to flow both directions before making any move toward contact. A small delegation approaches, 3 men walking with the unhurried confidence of people on their own land. Their leader, grey-haired and wearing a cloak of woven bark, studies the strange procession with intelligent eyes. He takes in the oxen, the wagon, the mixed party of travelers. His expression reveals neither welcome nor hostility, simply assessment. Sekwebu steps forward, his role as translator and cultural bridge now crucial. The conversation that follows unfolds in measured tones, each speaker allowing silence between statements. This is negotiation at its most fundamental level. Not the rapid-fire exchange of modern commerce, but the careful building of understanding between people whose worlds have never touched. What strikes Livingstone most profoundly is the chief's questions. Not what do you want, but where have you come from and what have you seen? The emphasis on journey rather than destination, on experience rather than intention, as if the very act of traveling this far, of crossing so many rivers, has earned the right to respectful hearing. The chief listens to Sekwebu's explanation with the same focused attention Livingstone has learned to bring to his observations. No interruption, no hasty judgment. The kind of listening that creates space for understanding. The same quality that serves you well when stakeholders bring concerns that seem unreasonable until you hear the full story behind them. After considerable discussion, the chief nods toward the village, an invitation, carefully extended and gratefully received. The wagon rolls forward again, but slowly now, respectfully. Children emerge from behind huts to stare at these strange visitors. Women pause in their work of grinding grain to observe the procession. There's no fear here, only curiosity and the natural caution of people who understand that strangers bring change. Livingstone feels the weight of that responsibility, knowing that this encounter will ripple forward in ways he cannot predict or control. The same weight you feel when entering new markets, forming new partnerships, knowing that your presence changes the landscape for everyone involved. The village chief offers them space to camp beyond the cultivated fields near a grove of fever trees whose yellow bark glows like gold in the late afternoon sun, water from a clear spring. Firewood gathered by helpful children who find these visitors endlessly fascinating. As evening approaches and cooking fires begin to flicker throughout the village, Livingstone sits with his journal, trying to capture not just the day's progress in miles, but its texture, the shock of cold river water, the moment of successful crossing, the careful dance of first contact with people whose ancestors have watched these same stars for countless generations. Tomorrow will bring new rivers, new encounters, new tests of patience and diplomacy. But tonight, there's satisfaction in having navigated today's challenges with respect for both the land and its people, in having moved forward without leaving damage in his wake. The same satisfaction available to you. When you approach your own crossings with patience, when you listen before speaking, when you remember that the strongest bridges are built on mutual respect rather than mere ambition. Rest now in that knowledge. Let the sound of moving water carry away the urgency that serves no purpose in these quiet hours. Trust that tomorrow's crossings will yield to the same steady approach that brought you safely through today's challenges. Sekalutu's embrace. The morning brought with it a different quality of sound, the distant rhythm of human activity rather than the solitary whisper of wind through grass. Livingstone's party had been walking for perhaps 2 hours when they crested a low rise and saw it spread before them, a settlement larger than any they had yet encountered. The village of the Makololo stretched across the valley floor like a carefully tended garden. Circular huts with their distinctive conical roofs dotted the landscape in purposeful clusters, connected by well-worn paths that spoke of generations of daily use. Smoke rose from cooking fires in thin, straight columns in the still air. The sight was both welcoming and imposing, a reminder that they were no longer moving through empty country, but approaching the heart of an established kingdom. You know this feeling, don't you? That moment when you realize you're about to enter a room where the stakes are higher than usual, where the relationships you build in the next hour might determine the success or failure of everything you've been working toward. The weight you carry suddenly feels more substantial, not because it has grown heavier, but because you're more acutely aware of its presence. Livingstone felt it too as his party descended toward the village. The careful choreography of first contact, the delicate balance between showing respect and maintaining dignity, between demonstrating peaceful intentions and projecting the quiet confidence that earns respect in return. These are the moments that test not just our preparation, but our character. The villagers had seen them coming long before they arrived. Word travels quickly in such places, and by the time Livingstone's small group reached the outskirts of the settlement, a considerable crowd had gathered. Not hostile, but watchful. Curious children peered from behind their mothers' skirts. Men stood with arms crossed, their bearing alert but not aggressive. The universal posture of people sizing up strangers, deciding whether these newcomers represented opportunity or threat. How often do you find yourself in similar moments? Walking into a boardroom where every face is turned toward you, where the success of what you're building hangs on your ability to bridge the gap between different worlds, different ways of thinking. The art lies not in overwhelming others with your vision, but in finding the common ground where trust can take root. Livingstone understood this instinctively. He had learned from his earlier encounters that the first few minutes would set the tone for everything that followed. So he walked slowly, his hands visible and empty of weapons. He stopped at what felt like an appropriate distance and waited, not the impatient waiting of someone eager to get on with business, but the respectful waiting of a guest who understands that he enters another's domain by invitation, not by right. The crowd parted and Chief Sekalutu emerged. There are moments in any significant endeavor when you find yourself face to face with someone whose support could transform everything you're trying to accomplish. The chief was younger than Livingstone had expected, perhaps in his early 30s, but he carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to being the final word on matters of consequence. His eyes held the particular alertness of a leader who has learned to read people quickly and accurately, a skill you likely recognize in yourself. The initial exchange was conducted through interpreters, a careful dance of formal greetings and diplomatic courtesies. But beneath the ritual politeness, both men were taking each other's measure. Sekalutu was assessing whether this strange white man represented the advance guard of invasion or the possibility of beneficial alliance. Livingstone was trying to convey his peaceful intentions while gauging whether he had found the partner he desperately needed for the journey ahead. What followed was a masterclass in the patient building of trust. Rather than rushing into explanations of his grand vision for connecting Africa's interior to the wider world, Livingstone accepted the chief's invitation to share a meal. He sat on the woven mats provided for him, cross-legged in the manner of his hosts. He ate what was offered without complaint or obvious discomfort, though the food was unlike anything familiar to his European palate. The simple act of sharing food, there's something profound in it that transcends cultural boundaries. The willingness to accept hospitality, to make yourself temporarily dependent on another's goodwill, communicates respect more eloquently than any speech. As they ate together in the warm afternoon light, the initial wariness began to soften into something approaching genuine interest. Sekalutu asked questions about the world beyond his territory, not the suspicious interrogation of a ruler concerned about threats, but the genuine curiosity of an intelligent man eager to understand forces that might affect his people's future. Livingstone answered honestly, neither minimizing the changes coming to Africa nor overstating his own importance in them. This is the delicate work that builds lasting partnerships, the willingness to be genuinely present with another person rather than simply waiting for your turn to pitch. How many of your most important relationships began not with elaborate presentations, but with quiet conversations where you listened more than you spoke? As the afternoon wore on, children grew bold enough to approach the strange visitor. Livingstone had a gift with young people, perhaps because he never talked down to them. He showed them his compass, letting them marvel at the needle's mysterious insistence on pointing north. He shared small gifts from his pack, nothing valuable enough to create obligation or suspicion, but tokens that demonstrated thoughtfulness. The chief watched these interactions carefully. In many cultures, how a stranger treats children reveals character more clearly than any formal introduction. The fact that Livingstone showed patience and kindness to the smallest members of the community spoke well of his intentions toward the larger group. Trust, real trust, is built through accumulated small moments rather than grand gestures. Each shared laugh, each patient answer to a child's question, each demonstration of respect for local customs added another thread to the fabric of understanding being woven between these two very different men. As evening approached, Sekalutu made a decision that would prove crucial to Livingstone's entire expedition. Rather than offering the polite hospitality due to any peaceful traveler, he extended an invitation for the party to remain as honored guests while they planned their onward journey together. The word "together" carried weight far beyond its simple syllables. It suggested not just safe passage through Makololo territory, but active support for Livingstone's ambitious goals. The chief had decided that this quiet, respectful white man might indeed represent opportunity rather than threat. That evening, as cooking fires flickered throughout the village and the sounds of daily life settled into the gentler rhythms of night, Livingstone felt a profound shift in his circumstances. The lonely weight of carrying his vision through hostile territory had been transformed into something approaching partnership. The same transformation available to you. When you approach potential allies with genuine respect, rather than calculated charm, when you take time to understand their world before asking them to support yours, when you remember that the strongest foundations are built through patience rather than pressure. Rest now in that knowledge. Let the warmth of shared purpose carry away the isolation that sometimes accompanies ambitious dreams. Trust that tomorrow's partnerships will grow from the same respectful approach that has already brought unexpected allies to your side. The Zambezi unveiled. The morning mist still clings to the water's surface as Livingstone finds himself seated in a dugout canoe, carved from a single massive tree trunk by hands that have known this river for generations. The Makololo guides move with practiced efficiency, their paddles cutting through the Zambezi's dark waters with barely a sound. Behind him, the village grows smaller until it disappears entirely behind a bend, thick with reeds and flowering vines. This is how progress often feels in the work you're building. Not the dramatic leap forward you might imagine, but this quiet, gliding motion. One stroke, then another. The rhythm of consistent effort carrying you deeper into territory that seemed impossible to reach just months ago. The river here is perhaps 200 yards wide, its surface broken occasionally by the gentle rise of a hippo's nostril or the quick dart of a kingfisher. Along the banks, massive trees lean over the water, their roots drinking deeply from the current that has sustained life here for countless centuries. Livingstone runs his fingers through the cool water, marveling at how this single waterway might connect the heart of Africa to the distant ocean. You understand this vision, this ability to see connections where others see only obstacles, to look at scattered elements and imagine the system that could unite them. The weight you carry includes this gift of seeing potential pathways that don't yet exist on any map. The lead canoe signals a stop near a cluster of water lilies, their white petals opening to catch the strengthening sun. One of the Makololo guides, a man named Sekwebu, points toward the eastern bank where a small herd of antelope has come to drink. They move with delicate precision, ears alert, ready to bound away at the first sign of danger. Yet they trust enough to lower their heads and drink deeply. They know when it is safe, Sekwebu explains quietly, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who has read this landscape since childhood. The river tells them many things. Livingstone nods, understanding that he too is learning to read signs he never knew existed. the way certain birds call when hippos are near, how the water's color changes as tributaries join the main flow, which stretches of bank offer safe landing and which hide crocodiles in their muddy shallows. This is the education that no planning session could provide. The deep knowledge that comes only from moving forward into uncertainty with guides who have walked this path before. In your own journey, you've discovered similar wisdom, the subtle indicators that signal when a market is ready for change. The tone in a potential partner's voice that reveals genuine interest beneath polite conversation. The canoes push off again, following the river's gentle curve toward the north. Here the Zambezi widens into a broad pool where the current slows almost to stillness. Fish eagles circle overhead, their distinctive cry echoing off the water. Livingstone watches one fold its wings and dive, emerging moments later with a silver fish struggling in its talons. Even the eagles must work for their success, he writes in his journal that evening, the words forming in his mind as he observes the natural world around him. But they have learned to read the water, to see beneath the surface where others see only reflection. The afternoon brings a different quality of light, softer, more golden as it filters through the canopy of trees that arch over narrower sections of the river. Here the expedition must navigate more carefully, ducking under low-hanging branches heavy with fruit that the guides recognize, but Livingstone is only beginning to identify. This stretch of the journey requires a different kind of attention, less about the grand vision of where the river might lead, more about the immediate challenge of the next 100 yards. Branch by branch, turn by turn. The kind of detailed focus that you know well from those periods when building something new requires you to zoom in completely, to solve the immediate problem before you can step back and see the larger pattern again. The guides work together with an efficiency born of long partnership. When the lead canoe encounters a fallen tree blocking the channel, they don't debate or deliberate. One man steps into the shallow water to test the footing. Another begins clearing smaller branches. A third scouts for an alternative passage. Within minutes, they've created a solution that allows the entire expedition to continue. You've built teams that work with similar instinct, people who understand their roles so deeply that coordination happens almost without words. The weight you carry becomes lighter in these moments, distributed across shoulders that have proven themselves capable of bearing their share. As the sun reaches its peak, the expedition stops on a sandy beach where the river makes a sweeping turn toward the west. The Makololo guides know this place, have used it as a resting point for generations of river journeys. They move efficiently to prepare a simple meal, while Livingstone walks to the water's edge, studying the way the current has carved channels through the sandy bottom. The water here is so clear he can see every pebble, every small fish darting between the reeds. This transparency strikes him as remarkable after the muddy streams they crossed weeks ago. The Zambezi has had time and distance to clarify itself, to leave behind the sediment of its origins and flow with increasing purpose toward its ultimate destination. Perhaps this is what happens with any vision worth pursuing. The initial stages are murky, filled with the debris of old assumptions and half-formed ideas. But persistence, steady movement in the right direction, gradually brings clarity. The path that seemed impossible to discern from the starting point becomes obvious when viewed from sufficient progress. Sekwebu approaches with a bowl of water and a handful of small, sweet fruits. The river provides, he says simply, settling beside Livingstone on the warm sand, but only for those who learn to travel with it, not against it. They sit in comfortable silence, watching the water flow past. Livingstone finds himself thinking not about the miles still to cover or the challenges that surely lie ahead, but about this moment, this perfect alignment of purpose, partnership, and place. The weight of his mission feels less like burden and more like privilege here beside this ancient waterway. The afternoon paddle brings new wonders, a family of elephants drinking at the river's edge, their trunks creating gentle whirlpools as they draw up the cool water. A crocodile sunning itself on a fallen log, so perfectly still it might be carved from the same wood. Troops of monkeys calling to each other across the canopy, their voices weaving a complex conversation that the guides understand better than any written language. This is immersion in a world that operates by different rules, where success is measured not in quarterly results, but in seasonal rhythms. where the most important knowledge is passed down through story and observation rather than written reports, where partnership with the landscape itself becomes essential for any hope of sustainable progress. You know this feeling from those moments when your work transcends mere business and becomes something more integrated with the larger patterns of human need and natural possibility. When what you're building feels less like imposition and more like collaboration with forces already in motion. The river carries them forward as the day begins its gentle decline toward evening. Each paddle stroke takes them deeper into territory that few outsiders have ever seen, yet territory that feels increasingly familiar rather than foreign. The Zambezi is becoming not just a route to somewhere else, but a teacher in its own right. Rest now in this rhythm of steady progress through unknown but welcoming territory. Let the current of your own deeper purpose carry you forward as surely as this ancient river carries those who trust its flow. Mosi Oatunya, the smoke that thunders. The morning brings a different quality to the sound, something beneath the familiar rhythm of water over stones. As Livingstone's party continues upstream, the guides exchange glances that speak of anticipation. There's a knowing in their eyes, the look of those who are approaching something sacred. The sound grows, not louder exactly, but deeper, more complex. What began as the gentle conversation of river over rock is becoming something else entirely. A low thunder that seems to rise from the earth itself. You know this feeling, don't you? Those moments in what you're building when all the separate pieces begin to converge, when the vision you've carried in your mind starts to take on weight and substance in the world. There's an electricity in the air, a sense that something significant is about to reveal itself. The Makololo guides point ahead, speaking in hushed tones about Mosi Oatunya, the smoke that thunders. Their reverence is unmistakable. This is not merely a destination on their map. This is a place where the earth itself speaks. As they paddle forward, mist begins to appear on the horizon. At first, just wisps, like morning fog rising from still water. But this mist moves differently. It climbs steadily skyward in great columns, catching the light and throwing it back in scattered rainbows. The thunder grows more insistent now, not the crash and rumble of a storm, but something constant, eternal, the sound of immense power held in perfect balance. Think of the weight you carry. All those responsibilities that keep your mind turning long after your body has found its pillow. There's something profound about approaching a force of nature that dwarfs all human concerns. The Zambezi, which has been their companion and guide for so many weeks, is about to reveal its most magnificent secret. Livingstone feels his heart quicken, not with anxiety, but with the deep excitement of discovery. After months of steady progress through unknown territory, guided by trust and sustained by purpose, he senses he's approaching something that will change everything. The mist grows thicker, more dramatic. Great clouds of it now, rising hundreds of feet into the clear African sky. The sound has become unmistakable, the voice of water falling from an enormous height, but still the river ahead appears calm, giving no hint of what lies beyond the next bend. This is the nature of true discovery, isn't it? You can sense its approach, feel the building energy, but the full revelation comes only to those who continue forward despite not knowing exactly what awaits. The guides beach their canoes on a small island. From here they explain through gestures and broken phrases they must walk. The reverence in their manner is even more pronounced now. They're not simply showing a visitor an impressive sight, they're sharing something sacred. As Livingstone follows them through the sparse vegetation of the island, the mist grows so thick it's like walking through clouds. The thunder of falling water fills the air completely now. A sound so vast and constant it seems to come from everywhere at once. And then the edge. Nothing in his years of exploration, nothing in all his careful observations of Africa's wonders has prepared him for this moment. Before him, the entire Zambezi River, this massive flow that has carried them so faithfully, simply disappears. It plunges into a chasm so deep its bottom vanishes in mist and shadow. The water falls in a curtain over a mile wide, dropping more than 300 feet into the earth itself. The sound is overwhelming. Not just heard, but felt in the chest, in the bones, in the very ground beneath their feet. The local name makes perfect sense now. Mosi Oatunya, the smoke that thunders. The mist rises like smoke from some vast underground fire, while the sound rolls across the landscape like endless thunder. Livingstone stands transfixed. This is not merely a waterfall. This is a conversation between earth and sky, between the patient persistence of water and the immovable presence of stone, its power and beauty wed in perfect harmony. He thinks of Victoria, his queen, his homeland, the world that sent him into this wilderness. In this moment of pure wonder, he makes a decision that will link this African marvel to the wider world. He will call it Victoria Falls. But even as he claims this moment for empire and exploration, he's deeply aware that he's not discovering something new. He's being shown something eternal. The Makololo have known this wonder for generations. Their ancestors have stood on this very spot, feeling this same awe, hearing this same thunder. There's wisdom here for those who carry great weight, who build toward visions that sometimes feel impossible. The Zambezi doesn't struggle against the chasm. It doesn't resist the fall. It simply gives itself completely to the transformation, trusting that what lies beyond the drop will receive and channel its power. The mist creates rainbows, dozens of them, arcing through the spray in brilliant bands of color. Even in the midst of this tremendous force, there's beauty. Even in the thunder, there's harmony. Livingstone watches the water disappear into the depths, then emerge again far below as a river transformed. The same water, but changed by its passage through this magnificent violence, still flowing toward the sea, but carrying now the memory of having touched the sky. This is what happens when we surrender to the forces larger than ourselves, when we stop fighting the current and trust the deeper flow. The river doesn't cease to be a river when it becomes a waterfall. It becomes more fully itself. As he stands in the spray and thunder of Mosi Oatunya, Livingstone feels something shift within him. The careful observations, the diplomatic negotiations, the steady progress through unknown territory. All of it has led to this moment of pure wonder, this reminder that the world holds mysteries far greater than any human ambition. The guides watch him with knowing smiles. They've seen this transformation before, the way the falls change those who truly encounter them, not just the impressive statistics of height and volume, but the deeper recognition of being in the presence of something eternal. Rest now in this thunder of falling water, this smoke that rises to touch the sky. Let the sound wash through you like the mist washes over the island. Feel how small concerns dissolve in the presence of such magnificent power. The weight you carry, the visions you're building, they're part of this same eternal flow. Trust the current that brought you this far. Trust the guides who've shown you the way. And when you reach your own edge, your own moment of necessary transformation, remember the wisdom of the Zambezi. Sometimes the greatest progress comes not from pushing forward, but from surrendering completely to the fall. Homeward bound. The thunderous roar of the falls gradually fades behind them as Livingstone and his companions turn their faces toward the west, toward the distant ocean that has become their lodestone. The path ahead stretches through territory no European has ever mapped, but the doctor's resolve burns steady as a compass needle. He has seen the heart of this continent now. He has witnessed its power to transform, and he knows, with the quiet certainty that comes after great revelation, that the journey must continue to its natural conclusion. The Makololo guides who accompanied them to the falls speak of the challenges ahead. Rivers to cross, dense forests where the sun barely penetrates the canopy, tribes who have never seen men with pale skin, who may view these strangers with suspicion or worse. But there is something different in Livingstone's bearing now. The overwhelming encounter with Mosi Oatunya has stripped away his last traces of doubt. He moves with the fluid confidence of water that has learned to trust its course. You know this feeling, don't you? That moment when the vision you've carried, the thing you're building, suddenly crystallizes with perfect clarity. When all the late nights and difficult decisions and moments of uncertainty resolve into a single, unwavering direction, the path may still be unmarked, but the destination has become inevitable. For weeks, they push through landscapes that test every reserve of endurance. Their supplies dwindle to almost nothing. The biscuits and preserved meat from the Cape Colony are long gone, replaced by whatever the land provides. Wild fruits, occasional game, the generosity of villages that choose to welcome rather than fear these unusual travelers. Livingstone's boots develop holes that let in every stream and puddle. His clothes hang loose on a frame made lean by months of constant movement. But watch how he responds to these hardships. No complaints, no dramatic gestures of suffering. Just the steady adaptation of someone who has learned to measure progress not in comfort, but in ground covered, in relationships built, in knowledge gained about this vast continent and its people. His companions, these remarkable men who chose to follow him into the unknown, show the same quiet resilience. When the path disappears entirely, they find another way. When hostile voices are raised in distant villages, they approach with open hands and patient diplomacy. They have become something more than an expedition now. They are a small community bound by shared purpose, each man essential, each contribution valued. This is what you're building too, isn't it? Not just a business or an organization, but a community of people who have chosen to believe in something larger than themselves, who wake each morning ready to take the next step toward a destination that exists first in vision, then in shared commitment, and finally in the transformed world you leave behind. The weeks blur into months. The landscape begins to change, subtly at first, then with growing certainty. The air carries new scents. Salt, the tang of ocean winds that have traveled across vast waters. Birds appear that Livingstone has never seen before, species that speak of proximity to the coast. And in the villages they encounter, there are new stories. Tales of great waters that stretch beyond the horizon, of Portuguese traders who arrive in wooden vessels larger than houses. The anticipation builds like pressure behind a dam. Every hill climbed might reveal the sea. Every river crossed brings them closer to their goal. But Livingstone has learned patience from this continent. He no longer rushes ahead, desperate for confirmation. He moves with the measured pace of someone who trusts completely in arrival. And then, on a morning when the air tastes of salt and possibility, they crest a final ridge. There it is. The Atlantic Ocean spreads before them like a blue-gray mirror reflecting the infinite sky. Waves roll in endless procession toward the shore, each one carrying the whispers of distant continents. The sound is different from the thunderous roar of the falls, gentler, more rhythmic, like the breathing of some vast, benevolent creature that has waited patiently for their arrival. Livingstone stands motionless for long minutes, his companions silent beside him. They have done it. They have crossed an entire continent on foot, through territories unmapped by any European, guided by wisdom older than empires, sustained by the simple faith that one step leads to the next. Feel that moment with them, the salt air filling their lungs, the vast expanse of possibility stretching to the horizon, the profound satisfaction that comes not from reaching a destination, but from having become the kind of people capable of such a journey. This is what awaits you too. Not the end of effort, but the transformation that makes any effort possible. Not the cessation of challenge, but the deep knowing that you have become someone who can meet whatever comes with steady courage. The weight you carry, it has made you strong enough for this crossing. What you're building, it has given you direction through unmarked territory. And the community you've gathered, they are the companions who will stand with you when you finally reach your own distant shore. The ocean stretches endlessly before them, patient as time itself, and echoes of a journey. And as the first light touches the water, you can almost hear the whispered conversations around evening fires, the shared meals that became moments of understanding, the patient explanations from guides who knew every bend of the river, the quiet courage of companions who chose to venture into unmapped territory because they believed in something larger than themselves. This is what remains when the journey is complete, not just the destination reached, but the person you became along the way, the relationships forged in shared purpose, the quiet confidence that comes from having crossed your own impossible distances. The waves lap gently against the wooden pier that stretches into Quelimmane's harbor, where a ship waits at anchor in the bay. After 24 months of walking, of navigating by stars and following ancient paths, of learning to read the language of landscapes and the wisdom held in local knowledge, Livingstone's feet touch planks that will carry him back to a world that can barely imagine where he has been. But standing here at journey's end, something profound settles into place. The magnitude of what has been accomplished, not just the miles covered or the maps that will be drawn, but the bridges built between worlds that had never truly met. The proof that with patience and respect, even the most daunting territories can be crossed. The Makololo guides who have traveled these final miles stand quietly beside him, their own journey nearly complete. They too will return home changed, carrying stories of distant waters and foreign shores, ambassadors between worlds that are no longer quite so separate. In their steady presence, you see the truth that no meaningful journey is ever made alone, that the weight of ambitious visions becomes bearable only when shared with those who understand the magnitude of what you're attempting to build. The ship's bell rings softly across the water, a sound that speaks of departures and arrivals, of cycles that connect distant shores, of the patient rhythm that governs all great undertakings. And in that gentle resonance, you might recognize the echo of your own journey, the daily choices that have carried you through unmarked territory, the quiet persistence that has brought you further than you once thought possible. There is something deeply peaceful about reaching a place where the land meets the sea, where all the rivers you have followed finally surrender to something vast and eternal. Standing here, watching the gentle swell that connects this African shore to distant continents, you understand that every journey towards something meaningful eventually leads to such a moment, where what you have built meets the infinite possibility of what still lies ahead. The morning sun climbs higher, painting the water in shades of gold and amber, and the small waves continue their ancient conversation with the shore, speaking in a language older than maps, older than the ambitions that drive us to cross impossible distances, older than the weight we carry or the visions we pursue. In this gentle rhythm, you might hear an invitation to rest, not the rest of abandonment, but the deep peace that comes from having given everything you had to something worthy of the effort, from having become someone who could meet the challenges of unmarked territory with steady courage and patient wisdom. The expedition members move quietly about their final preparations, their movements unhurried now, no longer driven by the urgency of unknown distances ahead, but by the calm efficiency of those who have learned to work together through every kind of terrain, who have discovered that the most difficult crossings become possible when approached with shared purpose and mutual respect. And perhaps this is the deepest lesson carried in the sound of these gentle waves, that every ambitious vision, every weight worth carrying, every goal that requires you to venture into territory others consider impossible, eventually leads to such a shore where what you have accomplished meets the vast ocean of what remains possible. The Zambezi's waters, which have carried them so far, which have shown them the thundering majesty of Victoria Falls and the quiet beauty of morning mists, finally merge here with currents that touch every continent, becoming part of something larger than any single journey, just as your own efforts become part of currents that will flow long after your immediate goals are reached. Standing on this pier, with the African continent stretching endlessly behind and the ocean opening toward horizons that hold infinite possibility, you understand that completion is not an ending, but a transformation. Not the cessation of movement, but the beginning of new currents. Not the abandonment of weight, but the discovery that you have become strong enough to carry whatever comes next. The ship waits patiently at anchor, ready to carry its passengers toward distant shores. But there is no urgency in this waiting, no anxiety about departure times or schedules, only the calm readiness that comes from having honored every step of the journey, from having given proper attention to each relationship formed and each lesson learned along the way. And in this peaceful preparation for departure, you might recognize the rhythm of your own best work, the steady progress that honors both the vision that calls you forward and the people who have chosen to travel alongside you, the patient persistence that transforms impossible distances into daily steps, the quiet courage that makes crossing any territory possible, the gentle sound of water against wood, the soft conversations of companions who have shared extraordinary distances, the warm sun on faces that have been weathered by winds from unknown territories, the deep satisfaction that comes from having attempted something worthy of your finest effort. All of this settles into the peaceful rhythm of waves that connect this moment to every shore, this journey to every crossing, this completion to every new beginning that waits beyond the horizon, where the morning sun continues its own ancient journey across waters that hold all the world's rivers, all the world's dreams, all the weight we carry, and all the magnificent things we are building, in currents that flow eternal and patient as the tide itself.